I watched The Long Game last night. It's just been added to Netflix, at least here in Canada. So I thought I'd share sort of like a mini review of the movie with you. If you don't know, The Long Game is a movie that's based on a true story about the San Felipe Mustangs, who were a group of Mexican American teenagers, high schoolers in Del Rio, Texas in the 1950s, who wanted to play golf and who were obviously met with discrimination and systemic racism. And you basically follow the team and their coaches as they attempt to participate in the Texas State Championship, I believe. So I'll start with a little spoiler-free section here. And in case you don't want to be spoiled and watch to the end, I'll tell you now, this movie gets a passing grade from me. I recommend watching it, and I'll let you know when I might start including spoilers in this video. It's not like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. So you can only be spoiled so much, but I will talk about some plot points later in the video, and I'll give you a warning before we get there. But why don't we start with casting? So I thought casting was good. Cheech, Marin, what's Cheech's last name? Cheech. He was charming. Dennis Quaid was charismatic as well. He didn't try to make the character overly sympathetic. I don't know if that's the right word, but the character felt very grounded and real. And I like the fact that, they didn't try to make him overly sympathetic. Like, when he tells the story about the war, and I don't think this is really a spoiler because it's just like a story he tells within the movie, but he says he knowingly sent a group of men, a group of boys into a situation. How do I put this in terms that won't upset Google or YouTube? Like, he sent them in a situation that he knew most of them wouldn't make it out of. We'll put it that way. Some of it felt a little forced, like the fact that he might have been an alcoholic. I mean, I guess adds a little bit of character depth, but when I get into the spoilery section, I will talk about some of the plot points and the storylines that didn't really add that much depth and I thought maybe were unnecessary, but that's for a little bit later on. Casting. Jay Hernandez, who played JB, I thought he was subtle, like in a great way. I also think he played his character right. He played him correctly. the kids, the kids were great. They were only miscast based on age, especially the guys who played Joe. I think Felipe was the other one's name. They're men. They're not 17, 18-year-olds. And obviously, the idea of casting adults as teenagers is nothing new. But it does break the immersion a little bit. You know, they've got like full 5 o'clock shadows the entire movie. Joe has a bicep the size of my thighs. But I did find the group of kids to be really likable. Like the scene where they go to Mexico was really cute, and I really liked the fact that it was just fun and there was no consequences whatsoever, but you really did feel like camaraderie, or like I don't know, they played off each other really well, those kids slash adults. But speaking of consequences, okay, I'm already getting into mini spoiler territory now. Like, I'm gonna start talking about plot points. So if you plan on watching the movie, let me know in the comments. Let me know that you dropped out here, and then come back once you've seen the movie and let me know what you think. So speaking of consequences, there were some conflicts, like the love story between Joe and Daniela, I think was her name, was just unnecessary. Like, I get the fact that they wanted to sneak a little romance in there. I think that Joe would have had, or could have had, his character arc without moving away with her at the end. You know, you find out in the credits that the real Joe turned down a bunch of golfing scholarships to work in, do they call it civil service or public service? Which is probably not the story that they'd want to tell for the movie, because it becomes a little more tragic. I don't want to say that about the life of the real Joe, but from a film perspective, from a character arc perspective, and the way they set up the character, because it is a movie character, it's not necessarily the real guy, he would not then have had like a positive character arc. It would have been like a bell curve. Because, you know, he'd go from we sort of have to stay in our own lane, not get into that space, to then playing the championship and everything we see in the movie, to then going back to, well, no, I'm not gonna play golf, I'm just gonna get a desk job and this and that. But in the movie, I still think that Joe could have had that positive character arc without forcing, you know, a romance story that barely scratches the surface. Like, they have an argument at one point, Joe and Daniela, about when she tells him she's going away for school, and it doesn't affect him in any way on the golf course. So, you know, it's just a B story or a B plot that's completely disconnected from the main idea, the main theme, the main storyline. Similarly, there was the pregnancy storyline. I mean, I guess that one adds a little bit more subtext, that like JB, like it gives JB a little bit more motive to want to lead these kids because he didn't have his own kids to do that with. It's just, again, like showing Lucy pregnant at the end feels very, okay, let's tie up loose ends and give everyone what they want. Oh, but on the subject of loose ends, JB losing his golf clubs. That's one where I would expect there to be a redemption, like where he gets his grandfather's clubs back, but it's totally forgotten. So I'd rather get a scene where we see something about that than a scene where, you know, his wife is pregnant, or where Joe is living in a college town, presumably. Yeah, so there's little bits like that where they're trying to up the stakes in the movie with a lot of like unfocused nuggets of conflict, and in the end I don't really care about any of them except for the main conflict of, you know, it can be boiled down to racism. I feel like for the B plot, C plot conflicts, if we could have focused more and tied in more with the main story, then I would have had more like emotional attachment to those B plots. JB taking the fall for Joe had no consequence at all. It was literally taken care of from one scene to the next. You know, I think like literally one scene he gets arrested, and then the next he's taken out of jail. And like in storytelling parlance, it's the all is lost, the dark night of the soul, the break into 3. And I just think they pushed that piece of conflict so far, so late into the movie, that they had no choice but to wrap it up really quickly. And look, I don't necessarily mind keeping things a little light, especially in a sports movie, although I would argue that this is so much more than a sports movie. It's not a movie about the game of golf necessarily. But all that aside, in a movie that's nearly 2 hours, I think they should have developed some of the conflicts a little more, and then left some of the minor conflicts out. But the overall theme, I think, was very well executed. You know, I love the scene at the end where they come back to their community. They're driving into town, and that contrast with the previous scene where they're leaving the country club and they're ignored, and then that homecoming where they're celebrated in their neighborhood, I think really displays the idea of representation matters for your community, for first and foremost. You know, you're breaking ground for them, not for the people who are already in that space. To me, it could have ended right there, and then you go into the credits detailing what happened to the real people, what they ended up doing with their lives, as they actually did do in the movie. You could just cut it there and then go into the wrap-up credits. But I did like that. Again, just basic storytelling, but show don't tell. I'm glad. I like the way they showed it, and I'm glad they didn't have, you know, a couple characters sitting there and telling us what the moral of the story is. I think that was brilliantly done. All this to say, you know, it's easier to focus on the weaker points sometimes than the stronger points. This movie is a 5 out of 10 for me. You know, a 5 is like, the movie did what a movie should do. A 5 to me is like the tipping point where I would recommend someone a movie. That's not a bad rating at all. And just like I said, you know, representation matters for your community. I think for that purpose, this movie is probably an 8 or 9 for the people that it represents. The movie was not made for me. But go out and watch it. If you're subscribed to Netflix, I think that's where it'll be in most countries. I recommend watching it. It's a great story. Like I said, it goes beyond golf, but I'm sure if you're a golf lover as well, you'll get some fun little references and jokes in there. So guys, let me know in the comments what you thought of the movie, if you've seen it, or whether you're planning to watch it if you haven't already. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I think these slightly shorter format videos are going to help with consistency in the summer, because it has been a scorcher. The temperatures are like in the high 30s every day, flirting with 40 degrees Celsius. I think for the most part I've managed to keep the laptop fan quiet this time around, but I do want to bring the consistency or the frequency of posting up again, and I think making slightly shorter videos for the next couple months is really going to help with that. For the next maybe month at this point, summer's really flying by. With all that out of the way, I'll see you